If a war really breaks out, is Venezuela going to end up fighting the US alone? The details are straight up chilling. Picture this: you're half asleep in the middle of the night and suddenly a breaking alert flashes everywhere. Massive US military movements in the Caribbean and small island nations saying they're ready to fight alongside Venezuela if America attacks. The news hits Brazil, and one of the president's top advisors drops a bombshell. If the US strikes Venezuela, we're looking at a new Vietnam, except this time in South America. Ships are moving in closer, radars are picking up weird contacts, and Venezuela activates its Defense Plan 2026 like it already knows what's coming isn't some small skirmish. It's a clash that could swallow the entire Caribbean. But the question nobody can answer is, what would make small Caribbean nations jump into a fight against a power like the United States? And how could one strike set an entire continent on fire? Why is all of South America on edge? Ever since US military presence in the Caribbean started ramping up, everyone around the region realized this isn't just some anti-drug operation. The number of ships, the formations, the way everything's being deployed, it all screams pressure campaign, maybe even prep for a military operation. And with every vague US statement, half threat, half negotiation, the anxiety gets worse. Because any hit on Venezuela isn't just a local issue, it instantly impacts maritime trade, borders, and regional markets, something multiple reports have been warning about. What really pushed things into panic mode is how close US forces have gotten to key choke points in the Caribbean. That means any engagement could drag other states into the conflict, politically or strategically. And suddenly, analysts across the board started saying the same thing. If Venezuela gets hit, the fight won't stop at its borders. Which leads to a bigger question. Why did Venezuela become the spark that could blow up the whole region? Because Venezuela isn't just another country. It's a massive oil reservoir tied into heavyweight alliances with Russia and China. So any strike on it isn't a local punch, it's a hit on global influence. Add US sanctions choking its economy, plus the naval buildup in the Caribbean, and you've got a country boxed in so tightly that the situation screams this isn't just an economic fight, it's a battle over control of the region. Which brings up another question. If the conflict is bigger than Venezuela, are the Caribbean nations really going to stay neutral? The moment everything flipped wasn't an American move. It was an intel leak out of nowhere, claiming several Caribbean states were preparing emergency plans in case the US attacked Venezuela. Not plans to protect themselves, plans to give Venezuela logistical support. That hit Washington like a lightning strike. Because if small nations start acting as a unified bloc, that entire US naval cordon built over the last few months suddenly isn't as airtight as the Pentagon thought. And the analysis that followed was even scarier. If the Caribbean opens its ports, allows supply routes, or even refuses American pressure, then any strike on Venezuela won't be clean. It'll trigger real regional chaos. For the first time, the question flipped. Not what if the US attacks, but is the Caribbean ready to jump into a game way bigger than itself? And here's the truly terrifying part. Even Washington isn't completely sure if it's walking into a war or just playing a dangerous pressure game. Strike or negotiations? The American position suddenly became the biggest question mark in the whole situation. One minute there's talk about deploying troops, and hours later the narrative shifts to some diplomatic solution. Even the video of that naval confrontation near Venezuela, Trump hesitated to release it like he didn't want anyone knowing who threw the first punch. The result? Regional states got the message. Even the US doesn't know what it's going to do next, and honestly, that's more dangerous than an actual military decision. That's when Brazil dropped its chilling question. If America is this hesitant, what the hell is coming next? Brazil's warning, a new Vietnam. Brazil, South America's heavyweight, was the first to break the silence. A presidential advisor came out with a statement that shook the entire region. Any US attack on Venezuela could open the door to a long conflict like Vietnam. Why? Because Brazil knows the war wouldn't stop at Venezuela's border. If the shooting starts, refugees flood across borders, tensions spike everywhere, militias slip through, and Brazil's own military might get dragged into a nightmare nobody had planned for. For the first time, the whole continent realized this wasn't about some limited strike. This could be a long, grinding war that swallows the region for years. Which raises a bigger question. What about Venezuela? Were they even ready for something this big? Venezuela's 2026 plan, built for a long war. Venezuela saw this coming, and that's why it announced Defense Plan 2026, a strategy that merges the military with civilians in a people's defensive war. They reorganized their forces as if they're expecting not a quick clash, but a long, drawn-out conflict that could last years. The plan makes it clear Venezuela isn't relying on just its regular army. It's calling up civilian mobilization networks, local defense units, and border deployments. In simple terms, if the US attacks, it won't be fighting just an army, it'll be fighting an entire population. That changes the whole equation and leads to the next question. If this all goes down, what would the actual fight even look like? The twist no one saw coming. Everyone expected a direct US-Venezuela showdown, but then analysts started warning about something far more dangerous. The real battlefield might be the Caribbean itself, and the entire regional system could collapse. Why? Because the whole area, its islands, shipping lanes, and ports, are interconnected. If war erupts, the first casualty won't be a ship, it'll be the supply chains. Fuel stops moving, maritime services shut down, trade routes linking South America to the world freeze in hours. Suddenly, the question isn't who wins militarily, it's who can even survive the fallout. And the most shocking new analysis said, if a war starts, the winner won't be decided by armies, but by the ports that manage to stay open. Those ports will decide who collapses and who holds on. For the first time, the scenario shifts from a border conflict to a fight for economic survival. Which brings us to the hardest question of all. Is the region ready for a war the armies might win, but the people could lose? And then you realize, what's coming is way bigger than a border dispute.